Right. WANA, as you've said, we look after, as a form of internal regulator, we look after the safety and operation of all of the nuclear power plants in the world, all of the civilian nuclear power plants in the world. And Eskom is a member of WANA because they run Koeberg. So myself and the chairman of WANA, Jacques Regaldo, will be coming here to South Africa essentially to meet with Brian Molefe because he's obviously an incoming new CEO for Eskom. And we like to have a very close personal relationship between the CEO and the leadership in WANA, because it's through that relationship that we can make sure that if we find things in the nuclear power plants that need work, need attention, we use that relationship and leverage the relationship with the CEO to get things done. And so when we come in, as we do every 4 years, and do a review of Koeberg, we send about a 40-man team in to come and spend 3 weeks at Koeberg, all international experts. They will assess the performance of Koeberg, look for any areas that might need improvement, and we then do an assessment, a numerical assessment of the station, level 1 being excellent, level 5 being you shouldn't really be running this plant. We would sit down at the end of that process with the CEO, so we would go and visit Brian and say to Brian Molefe, here's your report, all the things that we found, here's the numerical rating for your plant, so you know whether your plant is excellent or poor, and that information the CEO then uses to help drive improvements on their plant. So the reason we are here, the chairman and myself, is to meet up with Brian, establish that personal relationship with them, and work with him to make sure that Koeberg, as all other plants in the world, are operated at an exceptionally high level of safety. Yes, we do, as you've indicated, a corporate review of all organizations that own and operate nuclear power plants in the world. And that we do on a 6-yearly frequency typically. And Eskom did have a review recently during some of the changes. So it wasn't a special review, it was just a routine review. And so one of the things we'll be asking Brian and talking with Brian Molefe and his team is, so what have you done since that review? They undertook certain actions, and so although that's not the primary purpose of our visit, just while we're here we'll ask, so how's it going? Do you need any help from us? If you do need any help, what is it? We can go and find specialists in the world to come and work with you to perhaps deal with an issue that you might be needing help with. So it's really just a follow-up and a check. We would normally come back with a review team to do a formal review of progress, and that will be probably in another year or two's time. So this is just an informal follow-up, so we'll follow through on that with Brian. One of the other services that we offer operators in the world is what we call a new unit assistance program. So in the sort of conversations which are happening in South Africa about potential new nuclear build, we will be explaining to Brian what we can help with to help prepare Eskom for new build and new units coming on stream. The safety and performance of a plant are very dependent, I guess, on the ownership model. If you look at Koeberg on the one extreme here in South Africa, Eskom owns, operates, procured that plant on a commercial basis from the French. That's a very clear-cut relationship of ownership, accountability to the population that live around Koeberg, to the South African government, to the South African nuclear regulator. It's a very clear, clean relationship. On the other hand, you have something like is happening in Turkey, where Russia is offering to build a nuclear power plant in Turkey. Turkey won't own the plant, Turkey won't operate the plant. Essentially, all Turkey is giving them is a piece of land to build the plant with a fence around it. What goes on inside that fence is what Russia is doing, and the Turks are buying the power from the Russian operator. Now that becomes quite a complex accountability model, where in a inside Turkey, who has the nuclear safety accountability? How do they hold that operator accountable when that operator is in fact a Russian government agency that has sold them the plant and operates the plant? It becomes a little bit more difficult, I guess, to establish those strong accountability links for safety, for long-term financing, for long-term maintenance, health, for the money you need to spend to continually upgrade the safety on the plant as it goes through its life. So that for me is a very important thing, that any operator who is going to buy a new plant, or any government that is thinking about buying new plants, they need to decide where they're positioning themselves on that spectrum so that they have the right ownership model in place that suits them. So it's not just financing, it's not just a financing issue, it's a safety issue, it's an accountability issue, it's a regulatory issue, and all of those have a very sensitive interplay over what could be an 80-year lifespan. And relationships change between governments as time goes on. So that's why I'm saying up at this end of the spectrum, the Turkish end of the spectrum, it's more complex, it's more sensitive to change, and one has to be very careful how you establish those long-term relationships. Whereas in the Kuberg case, we bought a plant, we owned it, we operate it, we're accountable. It's very clean, very clear. So that's a very important decision that whoever's buying plant needs to think about from an operating point of view. So what you're seeing happening in the UAE is the Arabs have a contract with Korea. Koreans are building the plant for them and will operate the plant, wholly operate the plant for the first few years as the Arabs build up their own internal competence. And there will be a phasing out of Koreans and a phasing in of local people to run the reactors. So eventually you will end up with a model which is more like the Kuberg model, the wholly owned and operated end of the spectrum. But it starts off a little bit more towards the right-hand end of the spectrum and then gradually moves off that way. So again, that's a model which works for them. And from a WANO point of view, we've been very impressed with the way the UAE have gone about preparing themselves for this new build. The way they've established their own operating organization, the way they're training local people, sending them to universities, building the infrastructure. They've done things in a very responsible way to be able to ease themselves into this ownership model. They haven't said they have to do it all in one bang. They've said, I'm happy to build the capacity, and they've been doing that very steadily and investing in building the skills necessary to be able to take over the ownership in the long term. So it's in some ways quite a good model to look at, and as I say, they've done it very responsibly, and I was with the chap who's the COO just this week. We were at a meeting in Madrid together, and talking about, even then there are difficulties which he is having to make it happen, but they're not insurmountable, and they're doing it, as I say, very carefully, very responsibly, in a very thoughtful way. They've developed that program.